Thank you, everybody. We live. G, we live. Everybody, thank you for coming out for free game. This session's special because I think I've been talking about Charlotte Impact Investors for about how long we been going now, fellas? 2 years. I've been talking about it for 2 years in a bunch of different capacities, talking about like, hey, there's this thing that I'm a part of, and we're doing this thing, and it's super fun, and I'm doing it with these guys, and it's kind of been this thing that's been a something that we've been nurturing and wanting to get out to the world in the right way. So I'll first thank everybody for coming out the free game, and then second, I'll introduce the founding partners of Charlotte Investors. So again, thank you everybody for making time to come out the free game. We appreciate you spending time with us. We appreciate learning together, and I think tonight will be a fun experience because I leverage Chef Todd and Mr. McCall for mentorship myself. They're people that I count on as friends, but more importantly, they're people that I call when I don't know the answer to a question because it's something I haven't experienced, and they all have a wealth of knowledge. So I'll turn it over first to Mr. McCall. Um, Mr. McCall, no, I'll let you do it, man.
What you want me to do? Well, I'm a retired person. You can tell.
Mr. McCall is the how do Chef? You want to do a better job?
This whole city. I mean, if you haven't heard of Hugh McCall, you probably should just put his name in Google. It'll take you about 20 hours to read a little bit. But yeah, this man built this city and has dedicated the last chapter of his life to, I would say, racial equity, economic mobility, and we're lucky to have him as part of our friends and our group. But anything, we wanted him to be here, and he wanted to be here to just meet this crowd and see what we're up to.
And I think to echo, just super passionate about getting stuff done. I think everybody know me, and I call bullshit on a lot of people, right? Just like, yo, I'll just call bullshit for the sake of calling bullshit. And in meeting Mr. McCall was like, yo, it's curious. This dude has done so much and had built this whole town and has done tons of things, right? And I think everybody understands how I feel about systemic inequities. But to sit down with Mr. McCall and spend the amount of time that we've spent talking about these things and what we've seen him do with his own personal time and money to try to help push things forward has been remarkable. So thank you, Mr. McCall, and welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that good introduction.
It was all Chef. Next, I guess we'll go the other direction, and Todd, we'll go last. Is Chef. Chef Todd, you want to introduce Chef, or you want me to introduce Chef? I guess nobody wants to introduce themselves, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Todd?
I can't wait to hear what he says.
Yeah, go ahead.
This will be good. Well,
Kill him, bro. Kill him.
Well, David Sheffer is a friend. He's a Charlotte native, product of CMS Public Schools, a UNC graduate, and is an investor. So have you ever heard of My Eye Doctor? Okay, well, you can thank David Sheffer for the expansion of My Eye Doctor. And he's worked in the private equity industry, investing in businesses, providing the capital needed and the knowledge needed so they could expand nationally, and in some cases globally. And frankly, he's had very successful exits to the point where he and his lovely wife can do really whatever they want to do with their time. But we're very fortunate in that David, like Mr. McCall, like James, and so what I'm trying to do, we have a passion for entrepreneurship, and we have a passion for helping businesses grow so that wealth can be created for the entrepreneurs. And sometimes lack of capital is part of that challenge. And David has seen the flow of capital in meaningful ways and is using that knowledge to help entrepreneurs of all sizes.
Can I add one thing?
Go
Yes,
for
sir.
it, please.
I trained him.
That's right. David started off at McCall Partners, which is a firm Mr. McCall started. And I think the story goes, David was working late at night And Mr. McCall saw him working late and actually appreciated the work ethic, and that kicked off the relationship.
Is that a nice, humble introduction? Did he do a good job?
I'm surprised he only took 50%, 100% of the credit. It should have been 150%.
Smart man, smart man. All right, and last but not least, Todd Collins. And I'll let Chef, you could do the honors for Todd.
All right. So Todd Collins, also a dear friend of Mr. McCall and James and I. Todd is an urban cowboy. Grew up in Houston, but really wishes he lived on a ranch or a farm somewhere. Went to Morehouse in Atlanta. Later worked in corporate America at Accenture while living in Washington, D.C. Got his MBA at George Washington.
That's right.
I knew that. Got his MBA at George Washington, and has built an incredible investment firm where they own a lot of apartment buildings across the Southeast and across the country. He's developed software and sold that very successfully to a large venture capital firm called Insight Ventures. He owns a business called City Kitch. So sometimes it's a ghost kitchen, if you guys know what that is. Big up and coming industry, and he's early mover on that. It's on Freedom Drive, right off Freedom.
Thrift Road, one University, one in Greensboro.
Yeah. All around great person, and very, very philanthropic. Gives his time and his money with his wife and his 3 kids. Austin, his youngest son, is here. He's got 2 daughters also. What did I miss, Mr. McCall and James?
No, I think you got it. I guess, and we're usually not this lengthy of introduction. We have several founding partners that aren't able to make it tonight, and I guess y'all want to get them a shout as well, so we'll hold the ball.
Yeah, we'll go quick. Will Austin, who grew up in East North Carolina, he'll probably show up. He's a good father, and he's got 2 kids with presentations at school, so he's going to be late if he makes it. He runs the entire corporate bank at Wells Fargo. Another gentleman named Matt McGann, who grew up on a farm outside of Baltimore, runs a private equity firm in town called 10 Oaks. And Hal Levinson, who is, I think, probably the longest standing attorney at Moore Van Allen. He's been there for over probably 40 years at this point. So it's a good group of folks, and everyone has the same mission, which is, frustration, I would say, with the systems and with the lack of capital and access in the minority community, especially in Charlotte. We have all heard of all 50 out of 50. I mean, that gets thrown around a lot, but it should get talked about even more. And so I think we're trying to do our part with our time and our access and our money to help, but there's a lot more needs to get done. So thanks for being here tonight.
All right, so I think it's only fun and fair if we open it up to you guys. I think what we posted was tonight was going to be about capital. So I'll give Todd and I'll put the burden on Todd and Chef to kind of talk a little bit about, and we could dictate, right? We could go straight into questions, or we can give y'all about a 5-minute overview on raising capital, so y'all get a bit of a thought process on how it works. And again, I fit into this band because me and Todd were friends for some time, and we were on a Saturday call.
Yeah.
This Saturday call that we used to have to get up at like 7, 8 in the morning on a Saturday for. Right. And we finally realized that I was struggling with the idea of, I've never raised capital before, and it's daunting to me. Like the idea of like taking somebody else's money for me is like this scary, right? Like, and more about giving up control and being able to stay focused on the things that I care about meaningfully while having other equity partners. But these group of friends have helped me. I still have yet to take on capital, but they've helped me help other people not have the same fear that I do, right? Because when I actually needed capital, there was no capital available for me, right? Our businesses tend to suffer because of the lack of capital. So I want to make sure there's a quick understanding of that, and hopefully this group and the people who's watching don't have the same anxiety around raising capital that I still have today, if that makes sense. Fellas?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, very much like James in my early experience raising capital. I mean, like many minority entrepreneurs, I started my business from zero. And so the concept of raising capital was totally foreign to me. I thought if you wanted capital, you went to work and put it in your bank account and then saved it. And that's how we built our business, literally out of our bank account. And I had an interesting experience. We built a software company and we bootstrapped it, meaning we never really raised capital. And I had two business partners, Jim and Chris, who were still business partners. And we started getting calls from private equity firms asking to buy the business. And much like James, we never entertained it because we were so excited about the cash it was generating. And we didn't want to give up control that we never took those offers. And finally, we took an offer, and the private equity firm, they...
1 second, Todd. Say that, G.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay. The private equity firm, they asked for a meeting, and I said, no, I can't go this day. And they said, look, we'll send our plane down to come pick you up. And I was like, well, if you're sending a plane down, well, this is when I really understood capital after this. They said, we'll send the plane down. I was like, well, if you send a plane down, we'll get on it. So they sent the plane down to Wilson, which I learned is a private airport in Charlotte. And we got on this plane and we flew and we had the meeting. We inked a deal. And after the meeting, the managing partner of the private equity firm walked up to me. He's like, man, Todd, I'm so glad we got this deal done. Thanks for getting it done. I was like, no, hey, I'm glad we got it done, but also thanks for sending your plane. He's like, oh, you took the plane. Oh, great. I was like, this guy doesn't know where his plane is. And so we're flying back on the plane and we're high-five with my business partners and they're like, man, we killed it. And I was like, no, the guy that killed is the guy that doesn't know where his plane is. And then I realized through that experience in private equity, and there's all sorts of levels to this, that the experience that I had coming up, and frankly, many people in our community have, where literally hundreds and thousands of dollars of capital, which would transform your business, are hard to get. It's not the reality in other parts of the world. And part of that is, one, knowing that exists, because I didn't know it existed, and also knowing how to plug into it at some level and make sure you're prepared when it is time to plug into it. So one thing that we have done with Charlotte Impact Investors is we've raised a fund, and look, there's all levels of funds. I mean, there's funds that are billions and billions of dollars, and there's funds that are smaller, and we've raised, a few $1 million. But what we've done is we've raised it in a manner where we get to make the decision to invest in businesses quickly, directly, and businesses that are here in Charlotte. And the people making the decision are, the guys sitting here and then the people that David mentioned. And we've been fortunate in that we've invested in, I believe, 4 businesses so far, all run by minority entrepreneurs who founded the business, and they're all doing incrementally better than they were before our investment. And frankly, we invest the money and we do nothing else but become cheerleaders or give advice or make connections. But in summary, really, the experience that it took me exiting to have, realizing that capital is available, I think it would be great for people to learn it before I did, sort of earlier on in the venture. And that's one thing I hope to accomplish.
Yeah, I would add maybe just a couple of things. Todd covered most of it. I would say I did not fund a business myself, or found a business myself. I started in the venture capital world and realized that the real work that happens in America and across the world is by people who are doers. And so I decided I needed to go do that myself. And so I would say I became an entrepreneur by acquisition, helped buy a business called My Eye Doctor, and then help run it for 10 years and learn how hard it is to manage people and make money and run a business. A lot of fun, but there's fires every hour. And I don't think I understood that as just an investor. And so I think this group has the benefit of now, through our careers and our lives, and we still have a lot to learn, obviously, but have now done both. Everyone in this group has both invested their money and their time, but also run a business. And I think it's hard. So I commend anybody in this room who's done it. I think if you are not an entrepreneur, that's okay too. But if it's there's a burn inside of you that suggests you should try it, I would say try it. But it's okay if it doesn't go extremely well. That most fail. But our group and a lot of other people across this country are here to try and help reduce the failure rate and increase wealth and create success. So as Todd and James and Mr. McCall mentioned, we have this group, CLT Impact. It is a nonprofit. Just to want to make that clear. I don't think Todd said that, but effectively we raised this money with the idea that it would be deployed into minority-owned businesses in Charlotte. And again, as Todd said, there's 4 of them so far, and the goal is for those 4 and others, there'll be more and more, to have successful outcomes where they really don't need our money anymore. And they return that money to the nonprofit, CLT Impact, and then it goes to the next and the next and the next. So they're also helping with this ecosystem of entrepreneurship across town. So we think it's a pretty cool, novel thing. It's very fun for us. I get inspired by, meeting bright, hungry entrepreneurs. And so, we're here to answer questions. I think from raising money, to use Todd's word, look, it can go as sophisticated as a multi-billion-dollar global venture capital fund, and it can be as simple as asking your sister for $20,000, right? And all those things require time and energy, and having some level of professionalism in your organization or in your business so that people take you seriously. And so I think when you think about ways to raise money, there's a lot, but I would characterize it as like friends and family, grants. I think I looked on the Be Social Instagram account last night, and your team did a good job of showing 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 different places that there's money available right now for minority business owners. There's debt, right? You can go get a loan, and some loans are very scary, and I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Predatory. I'll use the word predatory. Very high interest rates, but sometimes in the early days, that's all that's there. And so you got to decide what your risk tolerance is. So if you have options, maybe you don't go that route, but if you don't have options and it's your only chance, you got to weigh the risk rewards. And then there's equity, which you're selling someone a portion of your business, either to take that money and put it in your pocket, but more likely for smaller businesses is to go in the bank account to then fuel hiring, fuel spend, fuel growth, to put rocket fuel, for lack of a better word, on your business. So I'll shut up there. Anything you want to add, Mr. McCall, or you want to? We'll take questions. Yeah, I think the questions are most interesting for folks.
I won't use the mic. I'll let y'all. But everybody, how many people in the room have a small business? Please raise your hand. How many people in the room have had trouble raising money? Raise your hand. I hope you're here for a very long time answering questions. Does that make sense? I think our goal as a group is to provide capital and opportunities for Black entrepreneurs. I look in the room and I'm just excited to see people who enthusiastically want to get after their business. So please ask your question. If you don't know how to inform the question, just say it however you need to say it, and we'll make sure that we get an answer for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let your guard down. There's no formality here.
We're going to keep it as easy as possible. Yo, G, it's your show. Everybody, we can go question after question. Y'all tell us how we taking them. Hands up. However, whatever format is easiest for you guys.
And if I can make one other really small introduction quickly, I see Khalil and Malik in the back. I don't know if anybody knows Khalil and Malik Lloyd from Lloyd Visuals. Incredible media and production. Come up real quick. Come on. Come up real quick. So we had to do intros. I'll introduce these guys because they'll be humble anyways. But these guys are brothers. This is Malik. This is Khalil. Obviously good friends of ours. So they are one of the 4 businesses we've invested in town. Incredible media production company. They have really built something special. But I also say they're in like the first inning. They've gotten through probably the hardest part of the journey, in my opinion, just getting off the ground and bootstrapping and, putting all their time and energy and savings from their family into this business. But now they're thriving, and it's fun to have them as part of the group. And anyways, they can be a resource this evening as well, because they're living it like real time.
And I think it would be good for them. I'll hold it for a second so people. I think it would be good too if you have questions around process. I think the thing that I was most impressed with our CLT Impact team, we had an entrepreneur reach out to us, and Chef jumped on it, and I think he was our fourth deal. And Chef got it done in, how long was it, Todd? So I don't even know.
2 weeks.
He got the funding done from time of connection. Keep in mind, it was like there's people in the room that I know personally, right? So it was people who we had a bit of intimate knowledge on their detail on their business, so we were able to go fast, and without me even being involved, led by Chef and Todd and the team, they were able to get something done in 2 weeks. And for me, I was like super proud of us. For I think Hale was one that was on pushing us too. Like there were people who hadn't met. Did Hale get time with you? Each of the founders on their own found the time within that 2 weeks of their busy schedule to get with him and dig in and ask the right questions. And it was mostly through email. I don't believe we actually had a live call, but the team was able to like get something done that for I would say we moved we moved the mountain.
I'll do a quick plug for him too. So I don't know if any of you guys are into hats, but his name is Gio. He owns Fitteds, which is in town. Great custom hats, and they're actually moving and doing a grand opening at their new location at Camp North End at 7:00 on Friday night. So if you're into hats and you're interested in entrepreneurship, go by Gio's store called Fitteds. If not, that's fine too. He'll probably show up and be here. He'll be the one with like a cool purple brim on under his hat. So.
And again, I think G, like these guys, understanding. I know G online. I think just like Khalil and G's a good person to speak to, just so you can kind of understand the experience, right? And again, I'm learning these guys. I'm learning from these guys while working with them as well, right? So please feel free, dig, ask questions. Khalil, I think you wanted to jump for a second.
One, I was hoping to be a fly on the wall, so it's all good. But for sure, now I understand representation is important, so it's a pleasure and honor to be in the room. I did have a question for you all, if I can kick it off. I wanted to talk about the power of relationships. I know that the reason why we got to this point with being partners are through relationships, and you kind of knew of me before we met. And so I just wanted you to speak on the power of relationships in your work. We've had an opportunity to build a relationship, and what I found through my journey is that relationships move mountains, right? So it's not who you know, it's who knows you, it's who's willing to give you an opportunity. So just wanted to kick off questions with that one.
Mr. McCall, we've been doing all the talking. You want to talk about relationships?
If I can get this straight on here. Is it on? Well, if I was going to talk about relationships, I would just say that that's what really matters is so-called social capital. And I've been involved with another group of men as well, Malcolm Coley and Lloyd Yates, and something called Bright Hope Capital. And we own Leaper Construction. We own a trucking company, and we own a company that sells women's makeup. Anyway, all are African-American owned. And what we've been able to do just with Leap, I'll illustrate. When we took over that company, we did two things. One, we were able to pay the original owner, who was an African-American, pay him $1,800,000 for his business that it built up over his lifetime, so he can sit on a porch and retire. And we have changed the ownership. It's still African-American ownership. We had a backlog of about $80 million in jobs. We've made that over $800 million just because of who we know and being able to get them business with, they got to do the business. We don't do the business, but we were able to get them in front of people so they could win the contracts. And that's what it's really all about, is putting people in front of opportunity and allowing them to sell themselves. So we don't have to sell them. We just have to open the door for them. That's really what it's all about, is getting the door open so you can, or think about it in a baseball sense, getting to come to bat. You can't hit if you don't come to bat. And so this is really what we work on. And it's the most powerful of all things, is the social capital.
Well, we have a real estate company, as was mentioned, and we own all types of assets now. But we started off just one unit condo, 2-unit building, 4-unit building, and we were trying to buy this 4-unit building. And I had called 20, 30 banks, and they all hung up on me. And there's a guy named Stuart Scharf who I knew, and he said, "Oh, how are you doing getting that deal done?" I was like, "Man, I can't get a loan." And this was like a $200,000 building. It wasn't a lot. So he said, "What?" He's like, "Well, let me take you to go see my buddy Steve." And I walk in there, and he says, "Hey, Steve, Todd's buying this building. He needs a loan." He's like, "Okay, good, Todd." He's like, "I'll get you the information tomorrow." I was like, "Wait, you mean you need me to get an application to you? What do you need?" He's like, No, I'll get you the loan documents tomorrow." And it was the first time I realized how unfair it is because I had made the same call and didn't get a call back, but because I had a good introduction, I didn't have to submit an application. And that's sort of the tragedy of trying to get the ball rolling. But one thing that sort of the blessing in disguise with that was it created an intense work ethic where you're like, all right, I'm gonna overcome these things. I'm gonna sort of make sure I get into the rooms where I need to get into. So what I found, Khalil, related to that is persistence helps. Being proactive about reaching out to people if they don't contact you. Contact them again. If they don't contact you, then reach out to the person they may know, and sort of make sure that you can attempt to get in front of them. And then when you do get in front of them, make sure that you're prepared and that you have you've done the work and your financials are together and your business is wrapped tight, so that you make a great impression when you actually get that opportunity. And I did, Mr. McCall. One thing Mr. McCall has not said. I mean, he was chairman and CEO of Bank of America. He probably lent more money to businesses than anybody else in the city, frankly, and
World.
in the world. And
Say that on the mic, please.
I said I was thinking that too.
Talk this shit, Mr. McCall.
while he's the one thing I will say with Mr. McCall, we were in a room, a meeting, it was a conference, and a lot of people in there. Mr. McCall is a keynote speaker, and I think I was the only minority face in the room of any minority. And they asked him, there was a Q&A period, and they said, "Mr. McCall, what are you spending your time on now? Because what are some of the things you're spending your time on?" And he said, "Well, I'm trying to help grow minority businesses." And look, he didn't say it because of me. I thought a lot of it because he's speaking to a room of people that, frankly, may not have that same priority, but he let them know that that is his priority. And by default, some of them may think that. And I'm curious, I'd love for you to answer that, the question raised, but also I'd love to know, why have you spent your time under this purpose?
You have to get an answer. You get the answer.
Well, I'll give you a quick answer. And what changed my focus was the riots we had here in whatever year that was, whether that was 14 or 16, I can't remember. And I thought, this is my city coming apart. And then it made me look into what was going on, and I decided to do something about it. So it's just that simple. I'd like to say two things. I want to pick up on something you said real quick, though. You only get, when you have an opportunity to get in front of somebody, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And that first impression is really important. And it's very important to know your own business so that when you're describing your business, you can do it in simple terms and lay it out so somebody can understand what it is you're doing. And you need to know the difference between what you need. Some people say, I need capital when they really want a loan, or they want a loan when they really need capital. And the two things are different. Equity is one thing, a loan is another. And getting that all sorted out before you go ask for anything is really important, because if you can't answer questions about your own business, you'll never get a loan. You'll never get past first base. And I'm reminded that there's a company here in town called No Grease. These are two young men that came down here from up north in upstate New York and opened a business, and they built a really good business. And they came to see me one day just to be someone wanted to introduce them to me. And I talked to them about their business, and I said, do you have any loans? They said, yes, we've got one loan. And they were paying 14% for money as recently as 5-6 years ago. And went in a world that was a 3% world. And it took me approximately 40 seconds to make one telephone call and got them a loan down from 15% to 5%, and saved them $10,000 a month in their business. Now, I just met them. It isn't a big deal, but they were talking to me about the business. I could see they knew what they were doing. They knew that they had a good business. I liked them from the moment I met them, and I helped them. All took me literally, ultimately, not more than 2 or 3 minutes. And so that was what I call social capital, meeting informed individuals who knew what kind of business they had and could describe it. So it's very important to be able to describe your own business well when you're trying to get help.
And question everybody. Does everybody follow the difference between debt and equity before we even get in question? Everybody, by show of hands, everybody understood it? Somebody want to?
Yeah, more or less.
I'm gonna let Chef do it.
Yeah, sure. I don't know, but I can explain it in simple terms for now. So debt means you owe someone money on some given date with interest rate likely between 1% and 50% or more. I mean, payday loans even more. But debt means you owe them that money, and on some timeline, it might be like a car payments every month or mortgage payments every month. That's debt, right? Your credit card payment, that's debt. That's every month. And it's usually guaranteed by something. In many cases, it's your personal net worth. Like they'll come after your bank account. They'll come after your car. They'll go repo man, right? So, and in other cases, it's guaranteed by your business. As your business gets bigger, one of the benefits of having a bigger business is the debt is held by the business, not by you. So you won't have to make what's called a personal guarantee. But for small businesses, they're all personally guaranteed. And so if the business doesn't pay back the money, that means the owner has to pay back the money. That's debt. Equity is taking actual ownership, some ownership in your business. Now that can range from, 5%. Someone says, hey, I'm making this up. I think your business is worth $100,000. I'm going to give you $10,000 today. There is no timeline on which you have to pay me that money back. There is no interest. There is no amortization. But I now own 10% of your business for the rest of until we all sell it. Does that make sense?
Everybody get nice, clear?
Okay.
All right. G, you want to go live? Questions? You want to go in the room first? Go in the room first. I see Dave. You want to give him a mic? We got one. We got to take one. Make you catch Dave. See your hands,
Dave. Thank y'all for taking the time. My name is David Butler, CEO of Hugh House. We're a marketing agency based here in Charlotte. My question centers around, it kind of gets at some of what James was talking about in terms of like I guess the tension or the anxiety between wanting to take on capital in any of its various forms. We're in a business that we're cash flow intensive only when we're operating, right? We have low overhead, all those types of things. We're healthy, et cetera. But there's still this kind of, well, I guess I'll get to the crux of it. What is the advice that you would give, or how would you ease that for folks who may not feel like they're not in a position where they need capital, but it's more of something that is providing more so of a cushion, additional cash flow, and what are the options for people who are in that position? Just because I think a lot of times we think about these things in kind of like a visceral sense, where it's like, I'm raising money because I know I have a thing that automatically, a formula to make money immediately afterwards, so I can pay it back without having to do that. And if I'm not in that position, then I wouldn't consider taking on the money. So just kind of curious how you all would approach a situation similar to that.
Dave, it's interesting because we've went back and forth with that question constantly. And I think the thing that I've come to learn from talking to these dudes, and I'm short stopping it because we talk so much that I think you'll understand the clarity of my answer. Take the money when you see there's a clear path to grow with. Does that make sense? Because if you're in a place where you don't need the capital, clearly you're positioned, right, in a way where your relationships can get you in rooms to have conversations quickly, right? And you uniquely understand your business enough to be able to communicate it, right? And you want to talk a little bit, just like little brief, or because I think you said what your business was, but just so the people listening have context for people who have a similar business.
Right. So yeah, we're a full service marketing agency. We do everything from strategy through creative through community activations and engagement. Like I said, we're only cash flow intensive when we're operating. We have maybe 5-6 people on staff on a regular. We scale up as needed for specific projects, and those we manage our margins really well. We're healthy. We're making money. But yeah, we're just in a position where it would be, for those times when you're not operating, when you're waiting on the next project or you're building towards the next project, where there's not necessarily, it's not a business where there is an immediate path where you're selling something or marketing. It's mostly relationship-based business in terms of how you land projects, how you gain new clients, et cetera. So there's not necessarily a direct path from a sales perspective. It's a kind of a grind in putting those relationships together, making those opportunities, finding the value that you can provide, and really aligning those opportunities with potential clients and partners and that kind of a thing, versus being something where you're like selling a product directly and you just need to scale up on inventory and you already have your kind of like outlet for sales.
What you want me to start? I can start and then you guys chime in. Well, I would say this is a more generic answer to your question, but it's a great question, David. So I would start by saying, if you don't need the money and things are good, then you don't need the money, right? But if I was in your shoes or anyone's shoes, what I always do is I think about a 3 and a 5 year plan for my business. And in order to hit those benchmarks or those goals, that can be the amount of revenue you do, the amount of profit you're taking out and putting in your bank account at the end of the year. If I would characterize businesses as maybe 3, and this is generic also, but 3 ways. So some people start a business because they don't like corporate America. And if they can simply replace the amount of money they were earning on their job and be their own boss and set their own schedule, they're thrilled. And that's all they ever need to do. They don't want to manage employees. They don't want to manage a boss. They don't want to mess with any of that stuff. So if they're making $75,000 a year and they can find a way to create a business that they can make $75,000 a year within that bracket, and that their goal is to stay there and spend more time with their family or more traveling, whatever that may be, that person probably doesn't need to ever raise money if they can create what I'll call it like a lifestyle business, create a job, right? Then the second level is probably one where you're creating a business of some size with some employees, but it eventually becomes what's called passive income. So meaning if your goal is to make $75,000 a year, but not actually have your hands in the business, not be a doer anymore. That means you need to have employees that are doers, and you need to be able to make enough revenue to pay all your employees 1, 5, 10, whatever you have. And at the end of the year, you're making 75 grand doing kind of nothing anymore because it's on autopilot. That's another great way to be an entrepreneur. You may not need capital. I think the last one is someone who has a goal to scale. That's the word I'll use, to scale. And in that case, if you're saying, okay, if my 3 or 5 year plan is simply to go from making 75,000 to 80,000, I don't think you necessarily need capital. If your goal is to go from making 75,000 to 750,000, and you don't have some software that's going to scale because you've already built it, and you have a people intensive, creative, professional services business, I think the only way you can do that is probably with more people and more clients. And unless you're willing to reinvest the money that otherwise would be your profit into the business so that you can hire 3 new employees, and in Khalil and Malik's case, buy 3 more cameras, and I'm making this stuff up, but then the only way to do that is either do it, my words, kind of organically and slowly in a way you can afford through your business, or you take on capital to accelerate it. And so I think the first question everyone should be asking themselves is, what is my 3-year goal? What is my 5-year goal? And how am I going to get there? I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
I'd like to try and answer that question slightly differently. This test about 5 times. I have a theory that the time to borrow money is when you can get it. And when you can't get it, you can't get it. So I've spent a lifetime messing around with money. Anyhow, I would always, if I needed money or thought I might need money and I could get it, then I would borrow it. Now, the ways to borrow money, we haven't talked about that. The ideal way for a company like yours, who doesn't actually need it, but sees it available, and to put it aside, hoping to leverage it, is to borrow money on a term basis, like say 2 years of no repayment, then pay it back over 5 years. It's like a 7-year transaction. That's one way to do it. And that way you postpone having to pay it back because you don't really want to pay it back. You wouldn't have borrowed it if you wanted to pay it back. And secondly, there are other types of credit. People are revolving credits where you can get a credit that you might have it money 10 months out of the year, but you got to pay it back for a couple of months and before renewing it. But I like a term loan is a way to prepare for the future. If you see that the future's out there, like Chef was saying, if you know you're going to try to grow and you're going to need the money in your plan, then you should take it when you can get it. So, and you don't need a better lesson than one we're going through right now. I mean, 6 months ago, you could have gotten money at any price, basically. Today, you can't get money at any price. So that's why I say get it when you can get it.
Yeah, well, congratulations on what you've accomplished. I mean, that's impressive. And it sounds like you're running a fiscally sound business. I mean, you're, you know your business and you're running a P&L. And congratulations. I mean, you're successful right there. I mean, for your business and what, as Mr. McCall said, like a line of credit would be perfect. I mean, you have contracts, right? You have revenue, you have a history, you have tax returns, and you have all those things that a bank looks for when issuing a line of credit. And, you know, if you go to a bank, they're going to likely give you a line of credit less than what you want. But, you know, over time, you can get that credit line increased. And the beauty of a line of credit, frankly, if you don't need it, you don't use it. If you want to use it, you know, you draw it down and then pay it back. And, you know, it's a great mechanism for that most businesses use. I think it's for what you're doing. It's a perfect mechanism. So as David mentioned, like a bank and someone giving you equity, they have sort of 2 different motives. A bank's giving you money, they're saying, look, just pay. I don't really care how your business is doing. Don't fail, but just make sure you can pay back my loan. That's really what a bank's saying. Someone giving you equity is saying, you are here now. We want you to be much larger. And so, unless you have, and we call it a rocket fuel, unless you need rocket fuel to like go to other cities and shoot to the moon, immediately, then debt's perfect.
G, who's let's go in the room again. Any you had your hand up twice. Can we pass the mic up from Dave in the back? And please start with your name so everybody can hear it too.
Hello, thank you for being here today. My name is Nicole Flores, and I'll pose a more generic question. How do you attract capital when you are generating revenue and EBITDA, but you're still cash flow negative due to the significant capital expenditures that you have to spend on your business?
It is not easy. The answer is not easy, but that's because the process isn't easy. So I would say it depends on your business. So again, the bigger the business, the more stable the business often attracts more capital more quickly at cheaper rates. And depending on the type of business, they're not all created equal. I used this analogy last time we were in a room like this. So if someone told me they own a 2,000 square foot house a block from here, that's not the same value as a 2,000 square foot house in, Mount Holly or Eastern North Carolina or somewhere that's not in a strong metropolitan market with a lot of demand. They're very different. I mean, maybe multiples different on what it costs to buy that house. Businesses are thought of by the same way from sophisticated investors. If your business, in one example, is a software business where you have customers that pay you every month on time, and they've been your customers for 10 years, and you have 100 of them, and they're not going anywhere, that's a very sticky, recurring business. That's very different than a construction business where you have to go out and buy equipment, and you have a project this week, and you might not get a project next week. And so it's hard to answer the question without knowing sort of more. But I would say explore all avenues. Use your network, use the relationships, as Khalil said. Look at the grants that are out there. Talk to banks of different sizes. You might get told no 20 times, right? Like Todd's been told no at least 20 times. I've been told no 20 times. But we can talk more specifically at some point about your situation because it is hard to sort of stay in a vacuum. Yeah.
And I would make sure you understand your finances. Let's see if I got this. Okay. All right. Sorry. All right. Make sure you understand your finances. Okay. You said that you're cash flow negative, right? All right. You have a P&L, right? And if yet you have your income, you have your expenses, then you have your net operating income. All right. If you're actually cash flow negative because of capital expenditures, CapEx, so these are terms that you should, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should write them down and then understand them. Because when you talk to any bank or investor, they're going to speak in certain terms, and you should make sure you understand it. So you have your NOI, right? So hopefully your capital expenditures are the reason that you're negative. You're growing so fast. Maybe you're buying things that actually make your business appreciate, and that's why you're negative. And if you speak to someone, you're like, an investor, you're saying, look, I'm negative because I'm actually investing in my business. I'm growing so quickly that my cash can't keep up with my expenses. That's a great problem. Like who doesn't want that problem? I'm growing so fast that I don't have enough money. That's a wonderful problem. We've invested in people like that. They're getting so many contracts that they can't actually, they don't have the finances to pay for those what it takes to service those contracts. Now, on the other hand, if you're negative just because you're not making enough money, then that's a tougher problem to solve. So I would just make sure you know which side of the coin you are. And if you're on the side where you're just growing so fast you can't keep up, I wouldn't phrase it in a way that you're losing money. I would say we're growing so quickly that we can't cover our expenses. Just because that distinction means a lot.
So just let's define capital expenditures for folks, right? So an NOI. So let's use this business as an example. I'm going to make up numbers. I have no clue. Social status on Central Avenue. Let's say for fun, they make, I'm using $1 million a year in revenue. So they sell $1 million a year in apparel and shoes. They pay all their expenses. They pay their rent. They buy their inventory, do all the things. At the end of the year, there's $100,000 left over. That is their net profit. So that's profit is money you can put in the bank when all are paid. But let's say, for example, James and team decide we really want to do an expansion. We want to make this space, which I hope they don't because this is awesome. But if they want, we want to sell shoes and apparel and something else in this space, and we need to spend $200,000 in construction costs to put shelving, TVs, equipment, power outlets, $200,000. Well, if they made $100,000 in profit, but they spent $200,000 to do all this, they're negative $100,000 in cash flow because that is the capital expenditure. Now, by the way, the next 10 years, he's not going to need to do any of that stuff. He's already put the shelving in. He's already put the equipment in. Now he's just got to sell more stuff back here. And so that 100,000 of profit from over there, now that all this is happening, now it might be 300,000 of profit. But in the 1 year where he spent all that money to invest in this build out, it's negative. That's what Todd's saying. Does that make sense?
Make sense, everybody? All right, G, you want to take one online, and then we go back in the room. Everybody, please keep digging into the room and feel free to ask.
Right. So someone asked, what's the biggest hurdle in getting funding for a new business as a person of color?
Go ahead, Mr. McCall.
No, I didn't hear the question.
She said, repeat the question?
What's the biggest hurdle in getting funding for a new business as a person of color?
Shit, I would say walking in the room. I think when I email, it's fine. James Whitner sounds great when you read it on the email. Prior to Google, my James Whitner was incredible. I hit you with all adjectives and verbs and get you with the James Whitner. And then I walk in the room, they're like, you're him? Then the conversation shifts. I mean,
I did have that reaction to you.
Really?
Nah.
Well, I think getting access to capital for new business is tough, regardless of business. So, but getting access to capital for a minority business is even tougher. And frankly, some of the first sources of capital are not anything we were talking about. I mean, many people like, Bill Gates, it was his dad. I mean, people have sort of friends and family that are willing to bet on them. And sometimes, in our communities, we don't have friends and family that have the wealth to lend to an idea. And so really that's one of the first challenges, really, which should incent us to go ahead and be that generation that can help our nieces, nephews, and kids with that first batch of capital that they need. But the second, I'll tell you, if you don't have revenue, it's hard to get capital. People, banks, sort of Dave, they wouldn't lend like Dave. Like, he doesn't need it. They wouldn't lend to him. So when you need it, it is tough. But I would say non-traditional capital, the grants that David mentioned that are available, the city and county, they have different programs that are funding small amounts for early stage businesses. There's venture capital competitions that are hosted by like UNC Charlotte and other organizations. Those are some of the early stage capitals that you may want to pursue if you don't have, if you have a business without like hard assets, meaning, an apartment building they can lend against.
And I'll jump in quickly too, just to give to color to Todd's first reply. If you start to look at Black wealth versus white wealth, so whoever asked that question online, probably in front of a computer or their phone, just Google the disparities. I think the number is like shocking. It's like we have like 10 grand savings to like the average of $250,000 for white families. So it's when you start talking about the first round of capital usually comes from friend and families and close circles. And the reason the reason CLT impact exists is because that line of fire isn't, G, what up? We talked about you before you was in the room. That line of fire, it just isn't set up for Black businesses. Full stop. You got another one online before we take one in the room?
Yeah. What's the process if you're just starting up and launching?
What's the process of just?
If you are just starting up and launching.
Yeah, just so if you're just starting up a business, I think I mean, it's a lot of bootstrapping. Like there aren't the idea of getting funding, and Todd started to hit on this. Pre-revenue funding is next to impossible to get unless you got like hell. Even somebody said no to Facebook. Somebody said no to Uber. Somebody said no to all of these big companies that everybody can list because they're pre-revenue. Getting money pre-revenue is
I mean, right now, today, it's out of vogue, right? So a year or 2 years ago, if you were in the right circles, if you had the right buzzwords, if you had a track record of success, you might have been able to raise money. But so many people lost it in the last year or two just on a hope and a dream that now everyone is running from pre-revenue startup non-profitable companies when it comes to funding. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. This may be the best time to start a business and be disruptive and hire good talent. But raising capital for a startup today, it's very difficult. I'll say one more thing related to that and related to the disparity on raising money as a minority. I think, look, I'm a white male born in America. I was born on third base, starting there. So I acknowledge that. I think there are other folks who acknowledge that also want to help and give back. And so there are a number of very thoughtful, intentional pools of capital that are being made available in this city, but also around the country that minorities should be taking advantage of and should be looking hard at. And it doesn't really matter the reason why they exist. I mean, I think they exist. A lot of them exist because people care and they want to fix hundreds of years of problems in this country. But I think some of them exist so certain corporations can put it on their website. I don't really care. I think you should go get that money if it's there, is my point. So I think this is a time where there may be some incremental advantage relative to historic times for minorities to raise money in their environment. So look into that, is my point. And I think it's still not easy, though.
I'll tell you, the first thing you should do is not raise capital. The first thing you need to do is actually do the work. Like, you have to go create a business. You have to have a product or service that people actually want. You have to try to grow it. You have to say, what is my product market fit? Who's going to buy my product or service? And how many people will buy it? And what is the pricing? I mean, there's a lot of work that you should do before you ever go and raise capital. And I give Khalil with Lloyd Visuals a lot of credit because look, they did the work. They're producing great content. They had a following. They have a business. And then they said, wait, we have something. Let's go and let's figure out how to grow it. And then that's the part where you go raise capital. So the first thing, like, when it's funny, I'll have a conversation with someone. They're like, man, I have this idea for this business and I want to do it. And then I'm going to sell it. I'm like, wait, you already sold the business and you haven't even started it? Like, so no, you have to go and start a business and grow it. And then one day you'll have the great optionality, hopefully, if you go through all the hurdles, of deciding what is the best type of capital. That's like a blessed decision. But the first thing, I would just go do the work.
And I'll jump in because Khalil mentioned it. Just keeping it at Khalil. Half of us knew him. So when we all sat down and we were formed, and Khalil's name came up, we were all like, "Oh, you mean Khalil?" Like, and I think at least 3 or 4 of us had already spent time with him personally because he done the work. I met Khalil at an event that Chef pushed me to go to meet some other folks, and Khalil just walked up to me and organically engaged in the conversation. And we followed up a couple of times after that. He came to free games, so by the time we got without him ever knowing that I was a part of CLT Impact, he had no clue. So he also done the work on the relations part. So kudos to all of you for making the time to get out here tonight to just build on connecting, not just with us, but with each other. So we have a community to pick one another up, right? Because it's not just about talking to us about money. It's about creating an ecosystem where we're all building together and creating a community that we can pick each other up. I got one in the far back. Gee, is there a mic out there? We need to get one back there.
My name is Alvin Jacobs, and I'm a photographer in the city. How many of you how many of you have creative businesses? How many people in here who are creatives and you're artists that have your business in order? Have you heard of the Opportunity Fund? Who's heard of the raise your hand if you heard of the Opportunity Fund. Who has submitted an application for the Opportunity Fund? Do you know that there's up to $30,000 that is available to you from the city? That is free game. I want to see your application that expires on the 31st of this month. Go to the City of Charlotte website, and if you have a creative business and your business is in order, there is up to $30,000 available to each of you individually.
G, please, for the folks online, can you get with G to make sure we post that link online as well so everyone sees that link?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for saying it. Too.
Absolutely.
We got another question. We got two questions in the center we're going to take, G.
My name is McGuire. My question is, what are some tips or pointers that you can give to a business that is positioning itself to be like for seed funding and stuff like that?
Receive. I would say have your house in order. And we keep saying have your house in order vaguely, right? First and foremost, have your books in order. Make sure you have your financials organized for
3 years.
3 years financials organized, right? Be able to have a presentation or a deck built so you can be able to send someone an overview of your business so they can understand your business in how long before you get bored, Mr. McCall?
I would say tax returns are really important, that you need to have your tax returns available because that tells a story that people will believe, that is banks will believe.
Okay.
So that's one thing, just adding that. I'm good.
Okay, Chef?
I would, as these guys both said, be prepared, have your house in order, be organized, have someone you trust and know look over it, right? So if someone sends me a 5-page presentation on their business and there's 7 grammatical errors and 10 spelling errors and the wrong, I'm sort of like, this says enough to me about their style. And if this is important to them, they would have taken more time and they'd have been thoughtful about it. And so maybe that's not your skill set. I'm not great at detail orientation at times. So I asked my wife, can you please read this to make sure that I captured all the things that need to be said? And I said them in a way that makes sense and it's spelled correctly and it looks professional. And so I think that is a good way to say it, having your house. I used this analogy last time we were in a room like this. Like if you were going to sell your car and you wanted the maximum amount of money for it, you'd have it detailed. You wouldn't have candy wrappers on the floor. Like it would be ready to go. And you need to think about that as you're presenting a business plan to anyone, a customer, a vendor, a lender, an investor, anyone, to take you seriously. It's your personal image. And so I think having your house in order and having tax returns and having a P&L, even if you're not super sophisticated at this, talk to someone who is. There's a lot of programs in this city that are business accelerators, or they're cohorts that help you with these things. Because maybe if you are creative, you could be the best musician or the best artist, and this is not what you went to school for or what the people you associate with. That's fine. But there are people who are good at these things that can help you. So Next CLT is one. Aspire Community Capital, BoostPad, EOA. I mean, there are a lot. Khalil, what's the other one I'm missing? The City Accelerator. Anyways, Amped Up. Thank you, Khalil. So there's 5 that I just routed off, and I'm sure there's more I don't know about that are great resources in this city to get with peers and compare notes and have leaders and people who have been there and done that speak to you and look at your pitch and look at your work and answer questions and do it as part of a community, not, once and then you're kind of gone. And so I think if you have people in your network that you trust, use them. If you don't have people in your network, then looks like Will Austin might be here. Come on, Will. Come on, Will. What are you doing hiding over there? Anyways, I think you get the point. Welcome, Will Austin. We introduced you by name only earlier, but Will's the guy I mentioned who grew up in North Carolina, brilliant human being, Morehead Scholar at Carolina, Harvard Business School, great family. Now runs the corporate bank for Wells Fargo, and is a good dad. That's why he's late, because his kids were presenting at school and he had to be there. And they are 8 and 10, 7 and 9. God, it was close. See, we actually all like each other.
You know, the last thing I'll say regarding that question, you should use tools at your disposal. So you guys have heard of Canva. So you can go to Canva, you can type in investor presentation. It'll give you 30 to choose from. And you can go to Chat GPT and say, how should I describe my business to an investor? It's going to give you, I mean, you can do all these things to get you 80% there. And then once you're 80% there, you can go to the broader community and say, look, I have something that I'd love for you to look at. And it looks good. It's real. Give me your feedback. And then they may say, hey, look, you need a forecast here. You need a marketing plan. They'll give you other thoughts so you can incorporate that. But I would encourage you to use the tools, many of which are free online, that are at your disposal.
And one thing I'll add too, the pitch, make sure it's organic to you, right? If you look at the headshots, most of y'all dudes and ladies, when you see me, I'm in a t-shirt or a hoodie. When I met Mr. McCall for the first time in his office, I think I was in a t-shirt or a hoodie, right? I'm always authentically me, right? Be who you are, but own your pitch. Be who you are that doesn't mean because I'm in a hoodie, it doesn't mean I'm going to present myself in a way that means this hoodie, right? Means I'm going to present myself in a way that you would think I was wearing a Dior suit. I just happen to be wearing a hoodie and track pants. Does that make sense? Be who you are, but own that shit. Like, own your shit, own your pitch. Make sure everything else is on point, but make sure you're distinctively you, because that's what makes your business yours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think my question is more so like, okay, so let me give you some background. So the pitch part, the understanding of the presentation, I have that, right? And so right now we're forecasted at the end of this fiscal year to do at least like 1.2 million, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm positioning this business to then be able to be in the spot to where I can then go and say, okay, this is the amount that I'm looking for this amount of equity. Because I think where we are in our business now is like we're making a lot, but then it's like, okay, we're also spending a lot too. And so capital will be great there, because what we do, it's a convenience store in Rock Hill, South Carolina. A little background about it. My parents started a convenience store here about 25 years ago in Charlotte on the west side. We grew up in it. I went to school, came back, and I was like, you know what? I got this concept. Let's run with it. I had my parents shut down the store here. They had another one in Rock Hill. Me and my brothers took over. We renovated that one, just switched everything. And so it's more so of a modern convenience store concept. And so when a lot of people who grew up in these neighborhoods, you have like hood stores. And so we are the modern hood store. You go in there, you have fruits, vegetables, produce. We got a partnership with Atrium Health in Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's just so much. And so right now it's like I'm playing a game of chess with other convenience stores to position ourselves to be, the way I look at it, I'm focused on trying to build a monopoly in the industry, looking at other C stores, and I understand who are behind the counters because I grew up in the business. My parents grew up, my aunts, my uncles, their friends. I know the business, right? And so, like I said, this year we're forecast to do at least 1.2 million. Have another property we're trying to open at the end of 2024, and then another one at 2025.
So I got something for you. I'll pull up on you. How about that?
I'll send you the address. I got you.
Say less.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name is Jessica Davis. I co-found a video production company based here in Charlotte. I just want to know, like, being in position, you guys kind of answered a little bit before, but being in position to get capital, what's the way that we can show up as impressive as possible before we get to the bank? Because we already got to work 3 times as harder, right? Like you spoke before. So how do we show up as impressive as possible?
I think first realizing, I think Mr. McCall said it earlier, I think right now it's just understanding, and fellas, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the bank is kind of closed. Like, I think right now we're in a place where we're small business, banks are pulling back. So some of it is just recognizing that right now capital isn't coming from a bank, in how to be prepared for once it does open, and how you need to show up. How do you create the relationships now? Because they're going to say they're not closed. Sorry, Will. They're going to say they're not closed, right? Oh no, we're not closed, but they're really closed, right? So right now is probably a good time to understand who's who at all of the banks, right? And have them intimately understand the details of your business. So once they do open back up and a product opens up that they can service you with, then they can hit you, right? Because I think a lot of the things we said uh, when we answered the last question, I think all those answers still apply. I think the answer is kind of what Mr. McCall said and what Todd said earlier. Know who's open for business and who's closed, because that also will dictate who you should go to when to get what. Does that make sense? If a good is that a CFO? A good CFO knows where to get money when, if that makes sense.
I mean, Will's perfect answer this question generally, like, or at least amongst us, besides Mr. McCall, who's the GOAT.
Yeah. So first, my views only reflect Will Alston's personal views. So let's put the disclaimer out there. Look, I think it's from a banking perspective, relationships matter, right? And you just have to spend time getting to know, establishing relationships, and talking to people. I think that goes a long way. And it also depends on kind of what stage your business is in, right? I think true startup stage with no revenues, banks typically underwrite what the cash flows are and the ability to repay the loan. And they're going to look at that. And I got here a little earlier and heard some of the answers. So I completely agree with what Todd and Mr. McCall all said earlier in terms of being prepared. But I think it's knowing your numbers, right? And if that's not your strong suit, find somebody in your network or in your circle that can help you with that part and put all that together. But I'll leave it at relationships matter, and where you bank, build a relationship, because that'll help you on the business side down the road.
Will sound like President Obama. Said Barack, you here? Go ahead. Is another question in the room?
Hello, my name is Kelly Hall. I'm co-owner of NC Dance District, a hip hop dance studio. We've actually been in existence for 10 years. We actually made it through the pandemic when we couldn't open for 6 months, so we're still here. And we're actually looking to expand and get a much bigger building, not only for us, but for other creatives, dancers in Charlotte and surrounding areas to serve as a co-working sort of area for artists. So my question is there any benefit to owning versus renting a commercial space?
I mean, I'm a landlord, so I'm the wrong one I'm the wrong one to ask that question to. Look, the reality is, okay, if you're running a business, this is sort of my opinion. A business takes so much time and energy and capital that should go toward running your business, which is the dance studio, versus being a landlord. Because look, you're going to have a commercial HVAC that costs $25,000. You're going to have all these different things that you'll be responsible for as a landlord versus as a business owner. Now, once you have a really successful business and you just have extra capital that you need to deploy, yeah, maybe you buy a building, because there are tax advantages of being a commercial real estate owner. But that wouldn't be the first thing that I do. And as far as a dance studio, we own a number of properties around Charlotte. One is the East Town Market, and we've had, I commend you on 10 years, because we've had like 3 dance studios go in and out of that center like every 6 months.
It's hard.
It's challenging. And
we were creative, though. We figure out other ways to supply our business.
Well, I'll say here's what I would. This is as a landlord speaking to someone who, like a person who could be a great tenant. You have a great track record. You have a business that's been around for 10 years, right? You presented it very succinctly. Like it took you like 5 seconds to say what you did. Landlords will fight over you. I would go and negotiate a rate with a landlord that is much more beneficial than going and buying a building. And you will get in this market, as Mr. McCall said, the economy's changed a bit. Landlords are fighting for tenants. I would go and I would. You don't have to. You could hire a broker. You don't have to, but I would go and make them fight over you, and you'll be impressed with what you get.
And with that, is there are there any, I guess, keys to trying to obtain funding, because we are trying to build a massive building, or not build, but
Okay.
at least inhabit a massive building?
So and that's one of the advantages of having the landlords fight over you. There's build out costs that landlords pay to the tenant, which is standard practice in any real estate deal, and it's normally some number times square footage of space. And like we're negotiating deals right now that range from $15 a square foot up to $55 a square foot in build out costs. The landlord, if you sign a lease that's long enough, so if you're signing 1 year lease, they're not going to do a lot. If you're saying, like, I'm going to do 5 years or longer, they will pay for your build out. They will effectively be your bank. And you wouldn't be the only person doing that. Atrium, Novant, all large companies, this is how they operate. And really, that's how we should operate as well.
Candidly, I'm a person who has different beliefs, but what he's just said about we're negotiating our office facility, and it's exactly what he just said. We're looking at 4 or 5 different deals on, I think, 5 to 7 year terms, and they're going to be the built out's going to be 100% paid for by the landlord. So to Todd's point, it sounded like y'all was matchmaking right there. That could be like tenant, landlord.
I mean,
so
we
you
can
should,
talk later if you like.
you should hit him up afterwards in direct traffic. So
I've seen Todd dance. He could be an instructor too.
We welcome you anytime.
Well, but no, really. If you have, so you're gonna have an LOI, you're gonna have term sheets and all. We'd be happy to review that with you. We have a whole team. That's all they do, all day, every day. And there's like 5 levers in a commercial lease, and you can pull those levers different ways to make sure that it works out in your benefit.
I wanted to add 2 things to that. One, the way I think about it is, you've got a successful business. I'd rather see you reinvest every dollar in the growth of that business than to what Todd said, trying to maintain a property or manage a property. You also have flexibility. So as your business grows, you're not stuck in the property that you already own. You can move to the other spaces. And then when I first came in and I was standing in the corner over there, I know the question came up about wealth within the Black community and the white community. There was a consulting report that came out probably 6 years ago that talked about wealth in those communities. And even within, let's just say, the top 5 or 10% of earners in those communities and what it looks like. And one of the things it said is, as Black people, we are over-indexed to real estate. And real estate does not grow at as fast of a rate as operating businesses and the equity in the businesses that you're building. And so growing that cash flow in that business is going to have a greater long-term payoff generally than real estate overall. And I just, to me, that's something that, because I love real estate, right? And it's something that struck me as one of those things that I never really thought about it that way. It's something I think for a lot of us, we're very comfortable with it. It's tangible. We can see it. But the reality is equity ownership outpaces real estate returns. And when you compound that over a long period of time, that's part of what contributes to the wealth differential within Black communities and white communities.
we all got to do more of these, because for everything that y'all are both saying, the adjusted position is the reason we're here, right? We don't have access to capital to be able to cash in on that equity, right? So more of this will get us more of that. Does that make sense? G, what we got? I see somebody all the way in the back. I always appreciate the person in the back.
Hi,
And
how are
even
y'all?
somebody even all the way further in the back. You go first, and then somebody all the way in the back. You got the mic. Go ahead. You got it.
Hi, my name is Moasia. I own Iman Company. We cast models for music videos, photo shoots. I'm also a creative director, so if a client wants me to help them come up with a photo shoot idea, I'm there to just make it happen. And I'm big on relationships. Like, I want to gain relationships. I'm coming up to a year of owning my business, so I'm big on building relationships, letting people know who I am. The thing is, though, is when I have a client. So, for example, I have a client who needs some models for a clothing brand. I'm okay with accepting the compensation of like a T-shirt for the models versus payment. And I'm doing that because I want a relationship. I want to gain the relationships with them. But I guess my question is, how do you balance accepting payment and compensation for relationships?
Dave snatched the mic out of my hand.
Well, I would say, like in any relationship, set boundaries. Because there are very successful business owners who still, word I'll use, barter. You know, I'll cut your hair if you cut my lawn. I'm using a dumb example, but that happens. But at some point, you can't deposit that T-shirt in your bank account, and you can't pay your rent with that T-shirt. It might be a great T-shirt, but it's not that great. And so I think it's okay, in my opinion, if you can afford it financially as you're starting your business, to your point, you're a year in, to build your brand and build your clientele and start. But at some point in that, each one of your clients' relationships, it's got to be like a one-time thing. Like, okay, for this T-shirt, I'm not doing this for the T-shirt. I'm doing this because I believe in you and I'm willing to give you a shot. And you don't have to pay me for the first 30 days. But after that, you can have your T-shirt back if you want. Like, this is not a charity, right? And so I think you have to decide, is this a passion project where I want to do something because I love it and I can help people and I can maybe have a side hustle with it? Then fine. And you have a job on top of that. If this is your job and source of income, one T-shirt and that's it. Like, I think you have to set the boundary.
And one of the beauties of being an entrepreneur is you can say no. You don't have to do that. Your time is valuable, right? And people will ask for a lot of things that you can just say no to. Because one of the challenges is, and I experienced this with one of our software business, not the bartering part, but just not getting paid for really what you're giving. You know, if cost is the only thing that is making someone use you, then likely you don't have like the right customer and the right business. People pay for what they want all day, every day. And your business is no different than that. And I would just make sure you're not setting a precedent, because when you set that precedent, it's very challenging to get away from it. They're going to tell their friends or their associates, and oh yeah, give her 2 T-shirts. She's going to do the work. Like, no, we don't do T-shirts anymore. You need to pay us. I would encourage you to do that. No more T-shirts. I don't know your business like that, but I would stop that.
You're going to experience a drop off at first, but keep doing the work and everything they said will hold true.
Unless it's James's shoes that actually have like real value.
No, don't barter. Take the money. Promise you, take the money. Red. I think somebody in the red hat
Hi,
had a
my
question.
name is Maggie. I do I'm an eyelash extension artist. My Instagram is maglash _ Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Follow me if you want your lashes
I like
done,
that
ladies.
tag. I like the tag.
Thank you. So my question is, as far as investors, do you guys ever like consider our social medias? Like, is that changing more so that the media is growing and we're all into technology now, outside of like the tax returns and stuff like that? Like, do you guys take heed to our social media accounts? Because a lot of us put a lot of energy and time into our content.
I'll answer that one. I take heed into it as much as you do. If it's yours, you should be able to monetize it. So you shouldn't talk to me about it. Does that make sense? I'll obviously understand how you're leveraging or have the ability to leverage your cultural currency to make a business out of it. But if you haven't managed to make that a part of your business and you're not coming to us for capital to help expand that, then why would it mean anything? Does that make sense? Like, obviously I understand what it does for awareness, right? But I think a lot of people put a lot of stake and energy into building a social media following instead of actually building a business. Does that make sense? I think Todd said it earlier. Like, yo, let me see a P&L. Like, followers is cool. Who follow you, who DM'd you, who you chatting with in the comments. That's cool, right? But you have to have the ability to turn social currency into actual currency. Does that make sense? That's more the people who Kim Kardashian, everybody liking whatever she's doing. She's managed to take being famous. No shot. No hate here, Kim. Being famous not for not much of anything on a tangible talent. She's taken her social network and turned it into actual currency, while some people are just focused on the likes and the clicks. Make sense? All right. Was there another question back there? We need to take one online, G. Oh, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Khalil Lloyd. So I just wanted to talk about two things, criteria and process. So I just wanted to demystify those two things, okay? Criteria, typically within Charlotte Impact, and I'm not speaking for them, but my process was that you have to make sure that your gross revenue is $250,000, right? $250,000, you want to be in good standing with the IRS. You want to make sure you pay your payroll taxes, unemployment taxes, all that good stuff, right? Now, to my first question, I asked about relationships, right? So if you have a good relationship with somebody, that could potentially go out the window, the criteria, right? But off bat, the standard is that your company, you want to be generating at least $250,000 in gross revenue. And then again, have all of your finances in order and be able to communicate your value, have a viable business model that actually makes money, right? We're in business to make money. So that's key. All right, process. So I'll talk quickly about my process, right? In 2020, when the world shut down, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. I said, you know what, let me take this opportunity to invest back into myself and my knowledge. So I signed up for the Amped Up program, right? So it's a accelerator program that the city of Charlotte runs. It's free of charge. I think the criteria is that you have to make around 150 to 175,000, but it takes you through a 7-month program. And they give you the option to meet a lot of people that are subject matter experts in finance, marketing, you name it. Once I graduated from that program, then I entered another accelerator program called Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator, right? The theme here is that I needed to educate myself on how to truly run a business because I can't go to a rich uncle. I can't go to my mom and dad to ask for anything. If anything, they're coming to me. They're like, yo, Khalil, I need help with the mortgage this month. So I'm like, all right, cool, I got you, right? So that was really key. And so my process, once I graduated, I'm still in the EOA program, which I'm about to graduate, but by then I had already connected with some of the gentlemen in Charlotte Impact. And so all I needed to do then was to make sure that I communicated my value and I was really clear on what we needed. For me personally, I wanted to partner with them because of the relationship, right? So that I can call Todd, so I can call David or James and be like, hey, I got a question, right? So it can lessen my learning curve. So that was my reasoning. I just wanted to be really clear about criteria and process just to demystify that. And then again, I'm happy to have a conversation outside of this. I'm happy to be a resource to you all. So I just wanted to mention that. And then there was a question in the chat around like private equity versus venture capital. And so I don't know if you guys want to talk about that at all, but somebody in the chat asked about that. So I think that'll be good to just talk through.
Yeah, well, typically they're not that different at some level, right? So at the highest level, venture capital firms and private equity firms are kind of in the same category, same family, where someone, it could be a wealthy individual, it could be an endowment, it could be a pension fund, it could be the postal workers union, it could be anybody, is giving them money and saying, we are invested in stocks and bonds and real estate and a lot of other things, but we want a little slice of our worth to be invested in what's called an alternative asset. In this case, private equity, venture capital, to try and take more risk for more. So if you invest in the stock market for the next 20 years, you hope to make 8%. If you invest in real estate, you might hope to make 10%. The best private equity might make 20 or 30 or 40%, or you might lose it all. And so it's having some allocation to that asset class. Now, what do those people do once they have the money? They are typically investing it in businesses. Venture capital, think of that as more early stage. So maybe the first few years of a business, maybe more bleeding edge technology. So think new software, ChatGPT, think biotech, something that many people in the room will not even understand, including myself. but they hope to invest in, let's say, 10 companies. They might lose money on 8, literally lose everything on 8. One of them, they might get their money back, make a little money, but one of them is going to make them 100 times what they invested. And that's a lottery ticket that those people are sophisticatedly betting on. Private equity is a more mature business with actual cash flow, actual profits, been in business for years, often more predictable. And if they invest in 10 businesses, they might lose money on one, sometimes on none. They're probably going to make 2 to 3 times their money on the others. And if they get really lucky, they'll have some kind of winner, but it's not going to be Uber and Facebook and, Amazon and all these things that are out there that were really venture capital funded. That means someone took a huge risk way early. And for everything they do, 90% are going to just flame out. Private equity is the same concept, but they're putting money in a much more stable, secure, less risky, less lottery ticket type environment. Would you agree with that, Mr. McCall? I mean, he taught me all this. I hope I'm right.
No, your explanation is exactly correct, and I don't think anybody here is ready for private equity. We're not ready for that yet. You haven't built big enough businesses, but we're on the way. That's the way to look at it. So that's a good explanation that you've just made.
See what we got online. Anything else in the room while we look online? Uh-oh. Who's first?
Hello, my name is Mel. I own a company called Bespoke Opulence. It's a luxury concierge service. It specializes in lifestyle management and travel. It's in the pre-revenue stage. I just launched it in January. But my question is about once you do get equity, and how does it work paying it back? Like the process of, because you guys said like you're taking ownership of someone's business, there's no timeline or payback and no interest on it, but you do want to give back because you're going to give the money back to other businesses. So how does that process work? And do you guys work with companies and do follow up with them and all that?
They know the answers to all this stuff too. Look, I would say private equity doesn't have to be like institutional money. Private equity is a coined phrase that's a hot topic, but I mean, private equity could be your cousin who says, look, I got an inheritance of $50,000 from my great grandmother. And, I believe in you and I'd love to work a roommate or a friend. I'm just making any of these things. Now, they may not exist, but think of it the same way, which is, can someone give me money that I can use to build the business? And you may if it's private equity, you do need to usually get the money back to them in 5 to 7 years on average. But for an investor, equity investor, especially at the stage you are, or you might even be in the next couple of years, they might own it for a long time. And I think in my experience, all money is not created equal from the equity side. The perfect scenario is one that shares your vision and can be additive to your experience. Bad person, predatory, looking for exploit you, looking to take advantage of you, gonna be a menace, like every hour calling you, how's the business doing? How's the business doing? How's the business doing? You're like, I'm at lunch, So I think that there's good and bad. And you guys are sophisticated to kind of know when you meet people, generally your gut is probably right. But I would say when you're looking for a partner, let's get away from the word private equity. When you're looking for a partner, whether debt, equity, grant, if it happens to come with the word Khalil used, access and relationships, or a skill set that you don't have, that could be more and more valuable than the dollars, right? So there are times where someone thinks their business is worth $1 million. And someone from down the street they don't know that really just has some extra money sitting around because they retired is willing to say, fine, I'll value your business at $1 million and I want to buy 10% of it for $100,000. Someone who really understands your business and has been there, done that, has a relationship with access says, look, I only think it's worth $600,000. So I'm going to give you $60,000 for 10%. That might hurt your ego at first, But in the long run, you might be way better off, because if the goal is to take the money and the relationships and the access and the counsel to grow, think about that as a really important piece of who you're partnering with. Like, think of it like a marriage, or a strong relationship. Like, the money matters from where it comes from, but what comes with that money, good or bad, is often equally or more important. And sometimes you're just so desperate you need the money, you'll just take it. But I'll be honest, right? But you hope not to be in that position. As Mr. McCall said, if it's available, even if you don't need it, try and get it and store it in a safe place for a while.
And I think your question is, how do they actually get paid back one day is part of it. No, I think you were spot on. This was so one day, if you sell, let's say they invest, let's say your business is worth $1 million and they give you $100,000. That's 10%, right? One day, if you sell your business for $10 million, they want to get $1 million. So they're waiting. They're waiting for you to have I call it a capital event. They're waiting for you to have a capital event. Either someone's going to give you a new batch of capital at higher valuation, or they're going to buy a portion of their business. And that is a very mature conversation. I mean, I think typically, like where you are right now, it would be I would hope friends and family and those sorts of things, because you don't want, like, to David's point, you don't want to give away your whole business before you get started. So you want someone who has your best interest at heart, who's not going to take an excessive amount of equity in your business.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add to Todd made me think about it. When I was in business school, I had this class called entrepreneurial finance. And the first thing the professor asked us is, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? Right. And the reason I say that is because it's kind of like, do you want to own 100% of the $1 million business, or would you rather own 90% of the $10 million business? Right. And that's kind of where equity kind of comes into the picture. And so, when I think about what we're collectively doing, our goal, to David's point, with the relationships and the access and everything else, is to help businesses get to where they can be faster than they could do it on their own. Right. And so when I think about the equity, and I think a lot of times, like, again, within our community, we think a lot about like, no, I don't know how I feel about giving up equity. Right. It kind of feels a little unnatural. I don't know how I feel about having a partner, but I always go back to that. Do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And which one is more important to you? And, I'll tell you, I'll take $9 million over $1 million in being king. But everybody's got to make that decision for themselves. And I think the relationships and the access is what helps you scale from 1 million to 10. So that was the only thing I'd add there.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay, and I don't own a business, but I work in the schools, so I'm all about teaching and learning. So I wanted to seize this opportunity for any of you to think about when you were in these seats and the position that you were in your journey, and tell us either about your first big no when you were looking for funding and what you learned from that, or your first big yes and what you did to secure that.
Oh, I got one really quick, only because my big no is the reason why I still don't have. I think it's when we really 2008, when the last big recession happened, everybody, like, as soon as you said, "Can I?" No. Right. I think everything was a no, to Todd's earlier point, and I didn't have relationships with anyone that could help me get to yes. So I think that jaded me for so long that I never looked up until it was what Mr. McCall said, when people started saying banks would say yes at that point. And then I think it was too late. I didn't need money. Right. So I think that big no, which is the reason why I'm so invested in this, that big no 100% jaded me in thinking about capital in our business, right, wrong, or indifferent. We're a rare case where we've been able to make it this far without capital. But I think if I was to do the journey again, right, I would have probably looked up in some other times and probably made things a little easier on us along the way.
I don't know how to respond to that. I had a lot of no's. I tried a hostile tender offer one time, tried to buy the CNS Bank, and got turned down and drawn and quartered in the press and beaten all to pieces. And 2 years later, I came back and bought. They had merged with somebody to run away from me, and they got into trouble. I came back 2 years later and bought them for less money, both banks for less money than I offered the first one. So I had good luck on that on my first no. So no, I don't. I've had a lot of no's. I never accept them. I think is the thing that I never did. No just meant let's start over. So that would be my record.
Well, I always looked at it as no as that's your lost opportunity. I mean, because I'm going to keep going. You know, I sort of had two transactions that helped me get what I can sort of consider freedom. And one was I bought this 1 unit. I'm from Houston, Texas. 1 unit condo from Houston, Texas. This number doesn't sound real, but it's real. For $12,000, it looked like it should cost $12,000, and I sold it 4 months later for $24,000. I thought I was the richest man in Houston, Texas, but I used all of that to buy another building and then another building. You know, 2 unit, 4 unit, and then I bought a 36 unit building in Laurel, Maryland. It's called Allenby Gardens, and I sold it, and I made $1.2 million, and I was like, I'm free. I quit my job and I sort of just started on my way. But I will tell you, all on that way, I never spent a penny of the money that I made. I mean, and my wife, she reminded me of this. I always lived in a rental unit. I would buy a 2 unit building. I would live in a 2 unit building, one of the units. They'd be very nice, but it would be a rental. 4 unit, live in one of the units, and so on. Until I got married, and my wife was like, "Todd, we have to have a house. Like this is." So, but the whole point is, those were the like. Oftentimes, you're talking panels like this. You see James, and he's got stores all over the world, and you're seeing the fruit of all that labor. You're not seeing when he was planting seeds. No one's there. He's at his laptop. He's making phone calls on his cell phone. Like you're not seeing that. And so we're all at different stages. I mean, shoot, sometimes I feel like I'm still planting seeds. Hopefully, my goal is always plant seeds. So, but we're all sort of in the different areas, and those wins, they mean the earlier wins start meaning more than the later wins. In hindsight, is an interesting thing. I don't know.
How many units? We got a question. Quick, Todd. We had a quick question. How many units do you have now?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'll say this: we have a lot of different assets. One thing I'm proud of is we own 1,000 units in East Charlotte. In East Charlotte, between Albemarle Road and Milton Road, we own 1,000. So I like that. And the thing is, when we bought them, they were assets that were either under capitalized, people weren't investing in them, or they're undermanaged. People just didn't respect the residents, in my opinion. And when we first moved to Charlotte, we bought a community. It's called Woodfield Gardens. It's still there. And I'm not saying do this. I'm just telling you what I did. Right? So like I lived in a unit with my wife who was like, this is ridiculous. And we managed it, and we turned it around and got it going. And we bought the one across the street and the one down the street. And then we moved into a real house, and we have like a normal life now. But the whole point is, I knew when we saw those units, one thing about an entrepreneur, when you see something, you're not seeing it as it is now. You're seeing it as how it can be. So when I would see those communities, I was never looking at it like, look at this, it's dirty. Whatever. No, I was like, oh, I'm going to make this great. Oh, this is going to be a great place for people to live, including me. And so what I'm proud about, our communities are called NOAH, naturally occurring affordable housing. People who work regular jobs live there, who are not college educated and master's degrees. They're hardworking people, and we give them great places to live at a reasonable rate. And these aren't subsidized. This is just market rate housing. Anyway, so we have assets all over, but I'm very proud of that East Charlotte portfolio.
I think I ought to tell one story. People like me born rich and were always rich. When I came to Charlotte, I went to work for $12.50 a day. I want you to think about it. It took me 8 days to make $100. So that was how I started. And while we were making that kind of money, my wife was pregnant. We were renting a place to live, and I was saving $55 a month. It's amazing. So you got it's a climb. Life is a climb, and you got to keep climbing. So I think before I retired, I was making $30,000 a day, but I'm pretty sure I was.
That's good. Everybody's doing the math. 30 times 365.
Here, I'm. See, you thought I forgot you.
Hi, my name is Callie Dean. I am not self-employed, but I am grateful to be here. But I'm also here with a nonprofit organization, and I would like your thoughts and advice on um, how do you get fundraising or get sponsorship for nonprofit organizations? Does the Charlotte Impact Investors look into those areas as well? Because it's only so much fundraising you can do for a nonprofit to get things going off the ground, and you do have expenditures, off the gate to get things rolling and to get things going to be successful. So does the Charlotte Impact Investor Group look at nonprofit organizations for sponsorships? Because there's only so much fundraising that you can do.
Let me say it, please. I don't think, and fellas, y'all correct me, we're looking to work with for-profit businesses because the goal is to exit the funds at some point and reinvest them into other businesses. So that's the answer to that part. From a private equity side, do any of you got any personal thoughts there?
I mean, there's like Foundation for the Carolinas. I mean, is an incredible organization that provides a lot of funding to nonprofits that are doing work throughout the community. And there are a lot of those sorts of foundations that are providing significant funding to nonprofits. Those are the appropriate groups to go to.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add is I'm on the board for United Way, and United Way, it's completely changed from when I moved to Charlotte to where it is today. It's got great leadership, and we're very focused on place-based philanthropy. And we kind of rolled out our new campaign this year. And when you look at who we're funding, it looks materially different than what it looked like a decade ago. And it's a lot of, candidly, funding startup nonprofits that are in the communities that we're focused on throughout the Charlotte region. And I think that's great. And part of it is capacity building, kind of to your point, to help the organizations build the infrastructure to deploy the resources in those communities. And so the Unite Charlotte grants in particular are smaller grants for a lot of the kind of startup nonprofits in nature. But I think that place-based philanthropy is the right strategy. It's the one that we've pivoted to, and there's great leadership there with Laura Clark.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Carlos Carroll, and I have a franchise, home buying franchise. I have two of them. One of them operating here in Charlotte, and is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And so my question is, well, one of the things I have been trying to do since I've been in the real estate investing is get away from hard money. And so I was wondering, is CLP Impact, do you guys help with real estate investors, get away from using hard money?
I'm a real estate investor. I don't think we invest in real estate, only because typically real estate's debt it's a bit easier to get debt on real estate. But are you looking for money to help with the initial equity? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, acquisitions, rehab, and long-term rentals, things like that.
Yeah. We've not done it to date. I don't. We haven't done it to date, but you should send it over if you think it's interesting. I mean, as a real estate investor, we've done a lot of deals, sometimes with other people, so we're always willing to look at other opportunities. I will say one thing we look at, and a lot of investors look at, is the ability to scale in something of size. So, like, I'll give you for a multifamily building, for us to look at it, it has to be at least 120 units. And for a commercial asset, it needs to be like 25,000 square feet. So, but that's just our criteria. There are all sorts of investors that have different criteria.
It's David Butler again. I just wanted to add a comment for the young lady that asked about nonprofit funding. I think I say this because I'm on the board of an organization called Do Greater Charlotte, helping instill creative confidence in youth across Charlotte and underserved areas. And then also, Hugh House has a nonprofit arm called the Block Foundation Inc. And I think what a lot of nonprofits should consider is implementing some type of revenue model around your mission for the exact reason that you stated. So a lot of times, you go to the same kind of like corporate sponsors or the same individual sponsors, and you feel like you're maxing and tapping out on your donor base. But if you can find a way to wrap a revenue model within your mission, so for us, it's curriculum. So we are focused on showing Black creatives the opportunities that exist in marketing and advertising. So we give them the theory on the nonprofit side, and then hopefully they can build themselves up and build a relationship with us to where they could then become contractors that work with creative projects with us on the for-profit end of Hugh House as the agency. So our revenue model that we have on the nonprofit side, on top of going after corporate donations, is looking to license curriculum to different schools, institutions. So that's something that we're working on rolling out. I think a lot of times folks forget that nonprofit is a business designation. So it's still a business. So there's an opportunity for you to put a revenue model in place around your mission. How can you provide some more wraparound services to whatever population or mission you're looking to serve? Like Goodwill is a nonprofit. Rolex Watches is the largest nonprofit in the world. So I think that's another opportunity for nonprofits who are looking to increase the amount of funding that they're having flow through their organization, is looking at designing some revenue models that are attached to your mission as well. When you look at providing different types of technology as well, that's something for people to invest in as a part of your nonprofit organization. Specifically with Do Greater, William McNeely, who's our CEO and founder, he had very much a startup mentality to getting the organization off of the ground. So he was often pitching people as if he was raising money for some type of for-profit entity, even though it was a nonprofit, and kind of being rooted in that vision. So I would just think about revenue models as well as a potential opportunity for your organization, so that you're not solely stuck to waiting on that donor base or having to feel like you're always fundraising as well.
Hi, y'all. I'm Alexis. I'm a stylist, but I also have a company that basically helps different creatives be able to create authentically and give them network and stuff like that. But my main struggle right now is as I started 2 years ago, but trying to figure out price range when it comes to like dealing with your demographic compared to what your services you're providing. So it's just me trying to like, when you're talking to different businesses and they're asking questions on what their services should be priced at, which criteria do you usually like tell them to stick with, their services or where they live at?
Can I clarify? Are you talking about your stylist business or the creative piece? Or does it matter?
It really doesn't matter.
Well, I'll tell you what we did at my eye doctor is just one example, right? So we have these eye care practices all over the country, and using the same kind of example I used on a 2,000 square foot house, right? So if you are, let's say, a stylist, if you're a stylist in LA, right? The booth time, the rent, like, is super expensive just to operate. So you have to charge enough to where you can make a living. And I mean, there's the cost of living in LA, right? You have to charge enough that you can have a profit and have a wage. versus that same stylist who is in Charlotte is going to be at a very different level than, say, the same stylist is in Shelby, North Carolina. And so what we did at my eye doctor is every time we'd enter a new market, we would price shop. We would call every eye care practice in town and say, how much does it cost to get an eye exam? How much is a pair of Ray-Bans? And we would then say, okay, well, we know the barbells on the high and the low. And then where do we want to be? You know, to Todd's point, if people want you, they're going to pay for you. So if you know your competitors are charging, I'm just making this up, for your stylist work, if they're charging somewhere between $40 and $80 and you think you are the best, maybe you can charge 70, 80, or 90. But the minute you charge 150, it might be tough. But I think in my experience, I would competitive shop what you view as your peers.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
So I'm a fashion stylist. And
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure I clarify. But
No, yeah.
I live in Greensboro right now because I used to live in Charlotte. And I pretty much travel everywhere I need to be just to charge the price that I want to. Like I was just in Atlanta, or I'll go to Dallas or something like that.
Yeah.
So I can charge what I need to
Premium,
because when I'm in Greensboro, if I tell them that my rate is like a 75 an hour or 100 an hour, they're looking at me like I have two heads.
Sure.
So it's just, I guess I struggle with being at home charging my price compared to traveling.
Yeah.
I guess some of it is just that too, just owning your price. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Because again, I think we gave the advice earlier, because if you're willing to travel, your rate is your rate. Does that make sense? And then your work, you have to build into your work. Does that make sense? Every time a good price for me is when the value of what I got exceeds what I paid. Does that make sense? So if your price is $100, right? But every time you come through, they like, yo, man, stop playing, pay her. Does that make sense? You'll start to quickly find you're going to get more clients, and then that'll give you the ability to go up on your rate, right? But I think as a pricing exercise, especially in some service industries, and especially in this world of creative concierge services and all of these new bespoke businesses that's starting to become in vogue based on all the different experiences. This has become such an experience-driven economy, and now these experiences are being ring-fenced, and the pricing matrix is still over the board. You got to just own your shit. Does that make sense? Like boldly own it and take it. Again, if you're boldly owning it to Chef's point, and at a $150, you ain't getting no win. You might know in 100, if you're getting a lot more movement, then it might be 100 until you show people you worth 200. Does that make sense? But some of it is just like, yo, Dave, show your work, right? He gets his first client. His first client may introduce him to a second. Khalil, same, like show your work, right? We refer work out to Khalil that we didn't do internally. I got a call back saying like he murdered it. So he's not going to have an issue getting work at that price or higher because he murdered the last opportunity. Does that make sense? All right, we got two more up front, and we got anything online, and then we'll call it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maya Reynolds. First off, shout out to the Morehouse alum because I went to Spelman. But my question is, do you believe that you need multiple business ventures to sit in the chair that you guys are in? Because from what it seems like, you guys are all invested in other companies, but like, what did you know was your golden star to get you a seat at where you at right now? Like, this is the right business idea to get me where I want to go.
No, I mean, well, I always wanted freedom, and the freedom. So, truthfully, I always say I wanted power, and the power I wanted was you not having power over me. I wanted the absence of anybody having power over me. So I set out in life to be in charge, and I've been really successful at it. It just I set my goal at the top. When I went in the company, I wanted to be president. I wanted to be the top person. And so there weren't as many people trying to get to be the top person. So I set my goals high. That's basically what I'd say is why I got where I got.
How old were you when you became the top person?
Well, I was president. I was 38 when I became president. And the bank, yeah, of whatever the bank was at the time, NCNB. And then it took me 9 more years to get to be chairman and CEO. So I was 47 when that happened. But anyway, I mean, I knew what I wanted and so I did what it took. I worked long hours and my wife paid the price. I've always got to be fair. So anyway, that was my story. And I worked in one company. I mean, I went in one company. I stayed there 42 years.
It's on. All right. Thank you. Clearly, none of us know how to work a mic. Maybe James does, but he's used to talking more than us. I would add to that, and I'd say that's a unique story. And if you too can be the most powerful CEO in the United States, you should do it. But if that's not you, which is hard to accomplish, but you could do it probably as a Spelman alum, I think it's okay to guess and test. Like in my experience, like anything in life, you need to live with it, try it. I had breakfast with a friend this morning and he wants to do entrepreneurial stuff. And I said, my advice to him was set a time limit and a budget and don't get married to it emotionally because it's a business decision if it's a business. And so if you're willing to say, okay, I have $20,000 to my name, I'm willing to take 10 of it and plow it into this idea that I've been dreaming about and thinking about and talking about. And I'm going to give it 12 months. And if in 13 months you're broke and no customers that hadn't caught on, doesn't mean you should quit. Like there's a lot of great stories of people that just persevere through and keep trying and keep trying and trying. But at some point you have to know when to cut bait. And that's equally important as an entrepreneur is to fail fast. And hopefully no one in this room ever fails, but we all failed at something. I'm gonna fail again. That's okay. But I think ultimately, yes, having your hands in multiple things. If you're lucky and the one or two things that you try go well on the first take, God bless you. But having your hands in multiple pots can be useful. It can also be a distraction, right? And so I think ultimately you got to know where you are in your life and what your risk tolerance is and how much money and how much time and how much relationship you're willing to put at risk.
I was going to go where David kind of finished. My biggest concern from an investor perspective is you're distracted by too many things going on, right? So like if you've grown 3 businesses to be very successful, that's one thing, right? But if you're in the early stages, trying to have 3 different businesses day one, and then trying to go find people that want to invest, like the investor wants you to be focused on growing where they are investing. And so if you're like, well, I've got this, but I got these 2 other things over here and I'm splitting my time between the 3, that's tough if you haven't built scale in one of them. I think if you're talking about over time, you've had success with one, you build others, or you're testing out all 3 on, but I think when you start looking for investors, being distracted is something people get concerned about really quickly.
A good example of that is how the world reacted with Elon Musk that bought Twitter. Think about he'd had an opposite effect on other businesses he ran, but the world didn't like when he bought Twitter and Tesla paid the price for it, right? And the minute that he started to divest his attention from Twitter, the world started to treat Tesla a bit different again. Does that make sense? That's a live example that we all seen in the last year. Does that make sense? All right, one more question, and then we got any online, or is this the last one? This is it. And again, everybody feel free, I'm sorry, to stay around, say hello, meet, greet. If you got questions, the website is, goodness, I should know this. CLT Impact Investors. Throw it in Google, and then you'll see a picture of the chef smiling. You know you got it. Go for it.
Hello, my name is Reba. So my question is, what are the specific things you guys look for as investors from folks like us in the room? Like you spoke about the ROI, our P&L, the cash flow statement, all those things. What are things you're looking for to say, hey, we're going to invest in you either through debt or equity?
I'll go first, and then somebody else can go last because I think in sitting in a room with everybody, I think the couple times we've done it and talked to investors, I think it's been the passion, the one that jumped out to me most, and she's not in the room. Khalil, you know I love you. G, you know I love you. I know you in a room somewhere. So it's love. It was Anita though. Anita was so incredibly poised. And it wasn't, it just is how she expressed her business. And she wasn't rehearsed. She just knew her business, was passionate about her business, can speak to her business in the ins and outs in a way that all the entrepreneur and us immediately connected with her. So we all made a decision without talking to each other. So by the time we were talking amongst each other, I think everybody said the same thing. Well, Anita's a yes. And everybody just kind of like laughed, like, yeah, she's definitely a yes, if that makes sense. And I think for me, those were the things I see myself in Anita. And I think Anita was the person, I mean, it also helped that she had fucking gangbuster business, right? She had more business coming at her than she had revenue to manage the business. So she just needed additional capital to be able to service X times way more business that was about to come in. And she's continued to grow her business and come back for more capital, if I'm saying that correctly. Right? Am I right, Todd? Okay.
I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I think passion, poise, transparency, and honesty. Like if you're dating someone and they smoke, but they don't do it anywhere in front of you and you have no idea, and then you move in together and all of a sudden your house smells like smoke, you're like, wait a minute, you question everything, right? And so I think transparency and honesty, talking about failure, talking about success, talking about where you want to go, being relatable. And I think also knowing what you want from someone like us, right? Like I think each of the people that we have partnered with, like Khalil said it straight up, I don't need your money. I just want your access and your relationships and your counsel and your mentorship. Like that's great, right? And I think knowing what you want and being clear about that and where you're headed and where you want to go, not just about us, CLT Impact, but anybody that you're thinking about bringing on, you know, if they can see that fire in you and it's not like a used car, you know, like experience. And sorry if there's anybody a used car salesman, but it's a bad analogy. I'm sorry, but you get the point.
No, I think David hit on it earlier. Relationships matter. Like this is a partnership, and you know we're trying to use our resources, our networks to help any way that we can. So we got to make sure that we feel comfortable with the person across the table, and that they're going to be good stewards of those relationships and those introductions whenever they're made. And then I think others have talked earlier about about the numbers. I mean, look, for all of us, there's nothing financially in this for anybody sitting up here. What's in this for us is helping grow businesses, create jobs, and create wealth in this community. And so we want to make thoughtful decisions. It's a nonprofit, but it's all about helping build this community, the jobs, and the wealth. So we want to make good decisions. And so the numbers do matter.
And I'll jump in without say again, the community piece just doesn't start with us. Like y'all got to look within each other. Like the young lady that's a stylist, talk to Dave. Dave was on the other side of another business in the same role he is in today, left an agency to build an agency, had to learn how to price an agency, and still does whatever he needs to do to get pricing. I'm sure Dave knows Khalil, right? And everybody's a phone call away. And like I say it all the time, we are not competition. We are a community. You got a question, ask the question, I'm answering, I'm open book. Competing against nobody. This is an ecosystem and we all empower one another. That's the thing that y'all have to understand. Does that make sense?